Hello and welcome to On Work and Revolution, where we talk about what's shaking up in the world of work and education. I'm your host, Debbie Goodman, and today we have as our guest Dr. Lana Israel, who is CEO of a company called Muzology. Dr. Lana Israel is a globally recognized learning expert on memory, amongst other things. She published her first book on memory at age 13. Did I read that right? This launched Lana's career while a teenager as an international speaker and researcher. She is a Harvard and Oxford educated Rhodes Scholar whose research on memory has been cited over 800 times. She's been recognized with numerous awards, including the Nobel Prize Visit Award. Integrating her lifelong passions for music, memory, and the mind, Lana established Muzology, a music-driven ed tech company based in Nashville, Tennessee. Good location for a music company. Created by a team of PhDs and learning experts, Muzology offers an evidence-based approach to learning pre-algebra skills using an iterative series of music videos, which happen to be written by hit songwriters. In a nutshell, Muzology offers a clear, relevant, and fun way for students to learn math anywhere that they have an internet connection. And today we're going to talk to Lana about Muzology and the power of music to deal with the massive learning losses since COVID, particularly in math. If you're a parent, you'll probably know all about this. So welcome, Lana.
Thank you. It's lovely to be with you.
It sounds like you were a bit of a child prodigy. Share a bit about your early work on memory. I mean, it's fascinating.
Absolutely. So, this all evolved very organically out of my 8th grade science project. And I grew up in Miami, and the school I went to, it was mandatory in middle school that we did science projects every year. And science project time was rapidly approaching. I had no idea what I was going to do my project on. And my dad, who was a training consultant, an author, really interested in applying neuroscience to selling techniques, had this book by a British psychologist named Tony Bazan called Use Both Sides of Your Brain, or Use Your Head, different names in different countries. And he said, I think you'll find this book interesting and it might give you an idea for your science project. And he left the book on the kitchen table, and I was at 13 not going to touch anything my dad told me was interesting. So it sat there on the kitchen table for weeks until I got desperate enough without a science project topic to read the book. And I was just instantly intrigued. This is the first time I learned of this learning technique called mind mapping, which was a visuospatial way of generating, organizing, documenting information. The thing is, the book was written for adults, and all of the applications were essentially in business and industry. And I'm an 8th grader, so I don't care about applications in business and industry. I care about, could I use this thing in school to take notes, to write an essay, to study for a test? So I decided to do my 8th grade science project on mind mapping, one, to see if it really did work. Is all this true? They're saying in this book. And 2, could young people, kids, students use this technique? And I wound up using my classmates as guinea pigs. And my next door neighbor was an educational psychologist who came over with probably a 3-inch textbook on educational statistics and psychology. And I learned how to do t-tests and did statistical analysis on the results, which were pretty eye-popping, and wound up getting some preliminary evidence that, yes, mind mapping does work and can be used in education. And what happened after that was one of my former teachers was at our house working with my younger sister on a project and saw my science project display board. And she was attending a conference in Sydney on education, asked my mom if I would be interested in presenting. And so I said to my mom, wait, does that mean I get to go to Australia? And she said, yes. And I said, then I'm interested in presenting. So I wrote an abstract, sent it to this conference, and the rest was history. Everything snowballed from there.
Wow, what an interesting confluence. Okay, so first of all, my key takeout from that conversation is my 8th grader has got her science project coming up. I think I'm going to just find something interesting and leave it on the kitchen counter, and hopefully she'll discover it, because I don't think this science project's going much of anywhere right now. But that is such an incredible state of flow, to have something that just germinated in one idea, and eventually you're on a stage in Australia presenting on mind mapping for kids and students. Fast forward a few years, and you head off to a world in academia, right? Was that the natural progression for you?
That's right. So, after Australia, I left Australia with a book publishing deal from an educational publisher. I had written the book as a quote unquote handout to give out at my talk in Sydney, and wound up on national TV there. And so within days, had a publishing deal, came back to the States, started getting invitations to lecture domestically, then all over the world. I self-published the book with the inventor of mind mapping in the States, had it translated, created more multimedia learning content. So I kind of had this mini career as a teenager, and actually started a company called Brain Power for Kids, through which I continued to research, speak about, and develop innovative learning techniques and approaches to learning for kids, for students. And then, as you said, when I got to college and then graduate school, that's when I got really fascinated with the theoretical underpinnings of everything I had been doing for the previous 4 or 5 years. And so studied cognitive psychology with a focus on memory, a little bit of neuroscience. And I was absolutely on this path to become an academic, become a professor. And I joke that I had an early life crisis in England when I was doing my graduate work. I was doing a postdoc actually at the time at Oxford, and decided to leave academia, move to Manhattan, and go into the music business to pursue another childhood passion of mine, which was music.
That sounds like a massive detour, and such a different course that it was going to chart for you. So, what formed that decision?
I had started writing music when I was 10. I was just like obsessed with music as a child. I dreamt of becoming a songwriter one day. I mean, that was to me just my, you know, biggest fantasy was actually doing something in the music business and becoming a songwriter. And I, as stated, was on this path to become an academic, and started to think about this other passion of mine, and really woke up every day pinching myself going, could I do something like this? Could this be real? And I just kind of noted how I felt every morning, waking up thinking about that, like the excitement and the joy. That's when it just was clear to me this was something I had to at least try and pursue. Now, don't mistake the weekly calls I got from my father asking me if I had lost my insert expletive mind, right? Like, what are you doing? I mean, I started out literally working as the assistant to a music producer, not making much money, working really long hours. So my parents were certainly confused by that choice. And you know what? To some degree, as clear as it was to me that this was something I had to pursue, it was a little confusing to me too. I couldn't quite, tell you what I was doing and why at the time, but just felt compelled to do it.
And where did that lead? Because eventually there was another detour into entrepreneurial pursuits.
So what was really interesting is very early on working in the music business, and I had the good fortune of working for a really talented and creative music producer who, within months of me starting to work with him, had a big #1 hit and many hits after that. And so as a result, I found myself squarely in the middle of all things the music business. A music producer slash songwriter is really the heartbeat of the business, right? Everything really revolves around the song and the production. And so very early on in that process, it's like a light bulb went off for me when I'm like, wait a second, as a former memory researcher, music is one of the most powerful memory mediums that we as human beings have at our disposal. And when that occurred to me was I realized that, several times a week, we had artists and other writers come into our studio to write a song. And when they walked in the morning, a song didn't exist. And hours later, a song existed. And if that song got recorded by an artist and released and played on the radio again and again and again, and those were the days when radio was still our primary way of consuming music. So now I've dated myself. If that happened, weeks later, millions of people would know the words to something that didn't exist, several weeks prior. So that was pretty amazing. Like, as a memory researcher, I'm going, wow, that's pretty fascinating. And then as I started to like think about it more and unpack it more, what also occurred to me is this phenomenon is not something that happens at scale with this degree of immediacy. If you hear a song that you haven't heard for 20, 30 years, boom, all the words come back. That's mind-blowing. Like, if you think about that as a learning effect, that's pretty mind-blowing. In the learning space, there are a couple things we look for when we're evaluating a new type of learning technology. One is it replicable? So ding, 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 millions of people know all the words to this song. It's replicable, right? Next is, do we have some sort of systematic understanding for why we're getting the effect? Well, as I started to look into this and understood more about the neuroscience of music, we now know that music directly activates brain regions, multiple brain regions, that are critical for sustained and successful learning. Now, we might not know exactly how it all works, but we know kind of why it works. And so, ding, 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 we have some sort of systematic understanding for why we're getting the effect. And then, like, what's the size of the effect? Well, this wasn't a very scientific way of answering that question. But what's the size of an effect when you can remember something verbatim that you haven't been exposed to for decades? It's unbelievable, right? That we don't see those types of outcomes.
I mean, it's the first time that's actually occurring to me that, of course, I mean, I remember the words to songs that I heard when I was a teenager. Not so much the songs I heard recently, but the ones from way back. That recall is extraordinary. And the fact that there's actually a neuroscience of music. Is this a scientific pedagogy that exists beyond just your work?
This is what's very interesting. There's this very fruitful, dynamic area in science on the neuroscience of music, and some just great, great, great minds working in the field, but not necessarily applying it to learning. And so there's a dearth of evidence. I mean, there's a dearth of like really rigorous studies starting to look at the effects of music on learning in the very applied sense that we're doing this work at Muzology, which is part of what we started to do. Is we started to do research on this, and we've obtained really compelling evidence that this approach to learning works, and works more effectively than more traditional approaches to learning, which is a student being taught the same information through someone speaking about it or lecturing. What's so amazing is what you just underscored. You're like, oh, now that I think about it, it's kind of obvious, right? This idea of using music to learn is as old as the sun. I mean, every culture and civilization used music or lyric poetry to pass on information, even pre-literacy. That's how religious information and rituals and information get passed on from generation to generation. And somehow, despite music's unbelievable power and efficacy as a learning medium, today, music is experienced primarily as a consumptive entertainment medium outside of early childhood learning, where music is saturated as a learning technique, as a learning tool. But then after kindergarten, first grade, bye bye Miss American Pie, the music dies, right? We stop using music as a credible pedagogical tool. And so I started Muzology to change that, because there's no reason why we should stop using music to learn.
So now the idea is germinated, and now you are about to step into the world of entrepreneurship. Is Muzology your first entrepreneurial venture?
Well, so I started a company when I was 13, as I mentioned. So, that wasn't launching a product. That was a business around research I did and speaking and lecturing. So I had a little taste of entrepreneurship from that. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I was always interested in entrepreneurship and starting a company, and had all sorts of ideas of things I wanted to develop. And it actually was about a good decade plus between kind of the genesis of this idea of using music to learn outside of early childhood learning and actually starting Muzology. And in that period of time, I ran a music technology company. I ran creative for a music-based entertainment branding company. I started an insights and analytics practice with a focus on the music industry. And one of my first clients was Garth Brooks' manager and Garth. And I started to talk to Garth's manager about this idea of, hey, what if we enlist the help of our network of friends and colleagues who are hit songwriters and music producers who are creating contemporary music that kids want to listen to electively. And instead of, writing songs about, ooh, baby, baby, I love you, like, what if we swap out the lyrical content to actually teach kids information of meaning and value that they struggle with in school? And, what leaped off the page as a place to start was math, which is typically a child's most challenging subject. And so the idea was not to write songs that sound like baby's music or kiddie music, but actually to write songs that sound like compelling modern pop songs that kids would like and respond to, but to teach them math that way. And the song is a component of what we do. It's actually the final product is a music video, and the video component is exceptionally important as well, because we use graphics to help reinforce the information being presented in the song. And we also have our talent dance and do choreography that, where possible, helps reinforce the information. So we have this very powerful multimodality experience where at the same time, a learner is hearing, seeing, and actually kinesthetically can be doing something that locks in the information different ways.
I mean, this just sounds amazing and extraordinary and obvious in certain respects for all the reasons we've already discussed. But I just think about all the families whose kids struggle with learning in conventional ways. And I think as we're starting to recognize, there are so many different learning modalities that are just not promoted in our schools these days, where Muzology sounds like the answer. I mean, anybody listening to this who goes, oh my word, where can I access this? So let's just talk about, okay, so first of all, just to backtrack, you clearly have a DNA of entrepreneurship because you've kind of been doing this ever since you were a teenager. This is not your first rodeo. But nevertheless, actually being able to launch a product and then get it out to the right market and consumer is a big deal in a very competitive market. I mean, the education technology sector is just, the proliferation of products, particularly in the last few years since COVID, there's just an abundance in many respects, which is wonderful, but very competitive. So how are you getting your amazing product to the right market?
I would underscore what you just said. I mean, EdTech, it's a really tough market, really, really tough market. We were very fortunate that we got connected with an educational charity, a not-for-profit in Knoxville, Tennessee. So we're based in Nashville, but we got connected with this great organization called the Great Schools Partnership in Knoxville, whose whole mission was to support any type of evidence-based methodology or program or platform that could move the needle for learning outcomes for students in Knoxville. So it's an amazing organization. And so they actually helped fund our first small-scale RCT, randomized controlled trial, that we conducted with a research professor at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And we obtained really amazing results indicating that Muzology worked. And on the basis of that, they actually helped fund the development of the first iteration of our platform that we then tested that summer with 300 summer school students district-wide in Knoxville. And there again, obtained these like unbelievably eye-popping, statistically significant results indicating that Muzology worked. It wasn't only the academic outcomes that were so notable. It was two other things. One was how quickly those results happened. And I mean, we had teachers going into that summer school program going like, we don't expect these kids to pass, which, is maybe not the right point of view, but it was from their perspective, like a practical point of view, right? Like, we don't expect these kids to pass. And they were astonished. At the end of the summer, these kids were like passing the district diagnostic, which is not supposed to happen for kids who failed math in a 4-week summer school program. Great documentary if anyone's out there and interested. And then the other thing that happened was we had kids in the beginning of the summer. And what I'm going to say is very upsetting and poignant, is that we had kids come in the beginning of the summer making statements like, I am dumb, I hate math, I don't want to go to college, I don't care about algebra in high school, like checked out. But the worst of all those statements is a child who has internalized I am dumb, right? Because if that's what you believe, like this self-fulfilling prophecy you're on, then there's no way of breaking that cycle, right? So you think you're dumb, you don't pay attention, you don't study, you get bad grades, that confirms your belief that you're dumb. And so these kids were stuck in this negative self-reinforcing feedback loop. 4 weeks later, after using Muzology, we had these kids saying, I love math. It's now my favorite subject. I can't wait to take algebra. I want to go to college and become an engineer. And my favorite all-time quote ever from a student about Muzology has not just given me confidence in my ability to do math, it's given me confidence in my ability to do anything.
So you get this first kind of case study at some level of scale that it works and it has profound impact, even in potential lost cases. And where to from there?
So, what started happening from there was word of mouth, where you have these great data, unbelievable testimonials from students and teachers. And so a lot of what happened for us at that point was this, again, very organically, like spreading word of mouth. We started to go to educational conferences. We stood out at these conferences because the platform and the approach is so unique and different and fun. And that's the other side of this is learning should be fun. Like when we're babies, learning's interesting. When we're young kids, learning is exciting and interesting. And the kind of the fun and the excitement and the curiosity somehow gets, quote unquote, programmed out of us. And, we kind of sit in rows and raise our hands, and the excitement and fun of learning tends to disappear, where, the majority of students probably wouldn't tell you that they find math fun. There's some students who will tell you that, but most of them, that probably would not be.
Not the descriptor that my teenager's using right now, that's for sure. Yeah.
Quotes from kids. You're learning and you're having fun. It's pretty cool.
So with word of mouth is one thing, but what's the next step for you? And as we unfortunately have to start drawing to a close, what's shaking up for you in 2023? Where are the big challenges and where are the big opportunities?
Well, for us, 2023 is the year we go direct to consumer. So that's been a strategic decision we've made as a company, is really empowering parents to be able to get a subscription directly, use Muzology with their kids immediately and directly, whether or not a school or district decides to purchase access to the platform. And that's because of exactly what you said. It's a very competitive marketplace. There are a lot of entrenched, huge pre-existing players and companies that have existing relationships with schools and districts. And, despite how effective a product might be, without a massive sales team and lots of capital put into building that sales team, it's sometimes hard to hit a certain level of traction when you look at selling B2B or institutionally, whereas, on the direct-to-consumer front, while there certainly are challenges there in terms of breaking through the clutter and reaching a parent is 100% empowered to go, oh, this sounds interesting and cool. My child could benefit from it. I'm going to buy it. And there's no red tape, and there are not hoops to jump through, and there are not layers and layers and layers of decision makers. And so that's where we're putting a lot of effort now, is building the direct-to-consumer side of the company.
Well, that sounds like an amazing strategy. I hope that anybody who's listening, please, can you take a look at the show notes? We're going to put Lana's details and Muzology's details in the show notes so that anybody can find them. And I think for parents in this day and age, where there's a gazillion products out there, but finding something that can really suit a kid that's really struggling at this point, particularly with math, this just sounds like a win-win for everybody. To get good at math and have fun in the process, that sounds amazing. So, and to not have to listen to nursery rhymes and to have like some great music to boot, this is a win for the whole family. Lana, this has been an amazing conversation. We could certainly spend a lot more time, but I have to say goodbye now. And thank you and good luck for an amazing 2023 for you and Muzology.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for hanging around all the way to the end. It would mean the world if you would rate and review on Work and Revolution on your favorite listening app. It helps people know that the show is worth listening to, and so I'll really appreciate that. Thank you so much.